The core of the update for today, we did have an open house on June 25th at the Martin Street Baptist Church, and the purpose of that open house was to present various design options for the running way, various mix and match combinations. That's the beauty of BRT. It's very flexible. You can have various treatments in different segments and receive feedback that ultimately helped us to determine recommended approach as we are moving forward. So preparing for the public outreach, we used a variety of different methods to get the word out. We sent out direct mailers. We had notices on buses, notices at bus stops. We had digital signs. We had flyers. We sent out about 4,500 direct mailers, postcards. So we just tried to use various promotional methods to reach out to a diverse population. I have to say the most successful, based on the feedback, is social media and direct mailers. Those were the top, social media being number one. This is how people get the information today. So as part of that outreach, we had very good turnout. About 124 people attended the meeting, and then we had about 557 participants who participated online by completing a survey. We also received comments. We had cards. We had a comment wall. Again, at the meeting, we tried to collect feedback in various ways, whether somebody was filling out the survey, or they writing on the post-it and sticking it to a map or comment wall. So various methods of getting feedback. And we also had 37 subscribers. These are participants, online participants who are interested in further updates, and they signed up for alerts and information online. So we have really 5 main themes that came out of the meeting. People were very excited about having bus-only dedicated lanes that would bring faster, efficient, and more reliable service. There were concerns about bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and safety, and improvements that are needed to make the entire corridor more multimodal. And there were some questions about how would you enforce bike-only lanes, and also overall safety and pedestrian access to the stations. But again, really excited about having high level of investment in BRT and that reliability it brings, and some work that needs to be still done on pedestrian and bike accommodations. We used the feedback that we received on different design options, and came up with a recommended design that was used to develop budget for the small starts application. We really needed to have a better understanding of what that running way would look like to price it out, because once that application is submitted, the federal share, the federal participation is locked in. So I will take you through all these 3 segments in the following slides, but this map shows the entire corridor and kind of orients you. We have 3 segments, one from downtown to approximately Tarboro. Another segment is Tarboro to Wake Med, Sunnybrook Drive, and then the final segment is from Sunnybrook to New Hope. In the first segment, the recommended treatment is dedicated bus lanes running on the right, along the right curb of the roadway. So you can see the image below kind of aligns with the graph. In the second segment, the proposed approach is to, along the two-way pair, is a median running transit way. I'll show you a better image because that menu is right over one of the bus lanes. And the third segment is mixed traffic with transit signal priority to keep buses on schedule to still maintain that reliable service, and BRT stations. So now some of these design concepts a little bit zoomed in. This is downtown going around, it's the Blunt, Martin, and Wilmington, and Morgan going around the Raleigh station. So you can see the red lines. This is what is called business access and transit. These are semi-exclusive BRT lanes, and the reason they're semi-exclusive is to allow that business access to businesses or parking garages or anything else that basically a vehicle can enter BRT lane to get to their final destination. So you will notice these red lines go all the way around except Martin Street. At this point, we're not proposing any dedicated lanes in this segment because of some of the conflict points with garages and access to the Go Raleigh station. But this is generally what, and this is consistent with what you've seen as part of the downtown plan development. Continuing with segment 1, leaving downtown and heading towards Scarborough, the proposed treatment is the same: business access and transit. Again, those BRT lanes running on the right side of the roadway, with access to general traffic vehicles that need to turn into businesses along the corridor. Then the second segment, this is the segment between approximately Tarboro and Sunnybrook at Wake Med. So this is the median running transit way, fully exclusive, dedicated lanes. There is no conflict with general purpose vehicles will not be entering that. This is just for the buses. So BRT lanes are located in the median, then they are buffered from general purpose lanes with small strips of median with plantings and landscaping, and then there's general purpose traffic and multi-use pedestrian paths and sidewalks. And then the final segment, this is once you go past Wake Med, so from Sunnybrook to New Hope, the BRT vehicles will transition into general purpose travel lanes. There will be still TSP to make sure that the buses are running on schedule, and there will be BRT style stations. So it's one seat ride from Go Raleigh station all the way to New Hope, where we are working on developing a transit center that will link ultimately to other routes across Go Raleigh system. So this is a quick summary of various design components. As we are looking at the design, we're also looking at different vehicles considerations. Right now, there are a couple of options. We can either go with 40-foot coach or 60-foot articulated. If you go with 60-foot articulated, there are options for having doors on both sides, left and right. This is especially important as we're thinking about building out the system in the future. This type of vehicle, specifically right and left doors, might not be necessary for New Bern design, but as we are expanding into other corridors and keeping that system thinking on, this type of vehicle will allow us to have more flexibility with design. So still working through some of the considerations. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about small starts application that we will be submitting on Thursday. The deadline is technically Friday, but we're trying to submit on Thursday to make sure that all files transfer, and we can confirm that with Federal Transit Administration to allow 24 hours for technical difficulties or anything else that can come up. So just to clarify, this application, it does define the amount of federal participation, so that is why it was really important for us to get back to the public, talk to them about different design options, and use that information to price it out, because whatever we tell FTA on Thursday is that's the amount that they will be anticipating, and that's the amount that they will be using to score the project as it comes to the federal share. It does define the overall project scope, length, mode, and termini, which you've seen already. That was in front of the council as the locally preferred alternative, which is defined by length, mode, start and end point, termini points, and alignment. And finally, it does not lock in final design. So don't think that just because what I went over with you right now is used for the budget purposes, this is not locked in. As we are going through NEPA, which is environmental clearance, and we might identify some tight points or maybe some areas where we need to maybe avoid a historic property. There is an opportunity to fine-tune it. Again, the same is with station locations. They're not locked in. We have station areas. So I know you're probably asking when will this get locked in. It's approximately between 30 and 60% design. And as far as the schedule, it's right now, we will be at approximately 30 for the system by the end of this year, and we'll be starting on towards 60% as we head into the next calendar year. So for the roadway component right now, for the running ways, we are closer to about 30% just because we needed to price it out, but it's still not locked in. So we did not touch the stations or any vertical elements right now. We kind of have priced out general footprint to make sure if we are going with articulated vehicles, that bus can park in front of the station. And for the overall price, for the overall budget, right now we are about a 50-50 split, which is consistent with what with Wake Transit Plan assumptions, and we approximately for the overall cost is about $70 million, which is again very close to what was assumed in the financial model in the latest work plan. And I mentioned in the beginning that there is also community benefits considerations as we were working with the community and getting some information about the overall project and potential impacts to the corridor. There are several aspirational goals and several themes that the community would like us to focus on and to include in the Small Starts application that will be submitted on Thursday. And they really summarized into three main categories: gentrification mitigation, community engagement and empowerment, and heritage preservation. So we will be including this information in the Small Starts application, and we will be working with the community on addressing that and refining to make sure that we are moving in the right direction as this project progresses. And some key actions is and a couple of completed actions. FTA project acceptance complete. This council already endorsed the locally preferred alternative. That's complete. So the next big step is the application submission. The Western kickoff, I've mentioned that's happening on September 5th. We are also gearing up for the second round of equitable development around transit. There will be 2 open houses at the mid to end of October. And the second BRT, New Bern BRT design open house, we are planning for the end of October as well. More information will be provided shortly. Stay tuned. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to skip to any other slides that I walked over quickly or answer questions.
I have a
Go ahead.
question. First, thank you for including the community benefits consideration part. I know we received some emails as far as working with the community from a community benefits agreement things. I know there's those are normally between developers and the community, but I think, we're definitely listening to the community and continue to hear that you say that we're continuing to work with the community as far as moving that forward. I feel is very important. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I know it's a separate project, but it has to do with the sidewalks that are going in. Is there any impact to that project, and as well as as far as fees or anything with BRT and construction?
So we are working closely with the sidewalk team. We are meeting pretty much weekly to coordinate the two. Right now they're moving as 2 individual projects. We're trying to identify various ways of moving that forward to minimize impact to the corridor and businesses along the corridor and residences. It's still work in progress, but we will be providing more updates once we are able to fine-tune the various approaches and also have a conversation with the community.
All right. And as we talk about the community to the council, I definitely want us to look at that assessment piece, the $47,000 that we're assessing. That is very small compared to this project and really the sidewall project itself, the cost to put that in and moving forward and possibly waiving that.
Okay, any other questions?
Yep.
Mr. Stevens?
Thank you. So I want to join with Councilor Branch. Thank you for including this community benefits consideration. Those 3 items obviously were identified by the stakeholders along the corridor, so it's great to see those in there. I guess my question is, jumping back to the small starts application, it seems like this is all about finding the sweet spot where you keep the cost low and the functionality high. But once you've done that, then you got to, with the submission, then you're fiscally constrained. And so whatever happens after that, you got to work back to that number that you submitted on the small starts application. Is that about right?
That's correct. So whatever the amount that we will be putting, just about 35 million, half of 70, 71. So that's the federal participation, because they will be using that number to determine metrics of, ridership and cost and various effectiveness
Okay,
factors.
so now going back to the community benefits to mitigate gentrification, I'm assuming that terminology includes mitigating dislocation. They're closely connected in gentrification, dislocation, right?
So the way FTA views dislocation is if the city or any project sponsor would have to go into the corridor and physically develop, say, a station. That could happen with larger projects like light rail or commuter rail.
Okay.
With BRT, we are staying within the existing right-of-way,
Okay.
so the dislocation that you are probably referring to is more of,
Indirect impacts, yeah.
increased cost. That is not an eligible expense. So as we are going through this conversation, we would have to identify resources to address expenses that are not eligible for federal contribution.
Okay, so that is the point I was trying to get at, and that is, so you've told me, if we believe that strengthening businesses and neighborhoods is going to be a goal of ours in this process, we're going to have to find those dollars somewhere else. Is that what I just heard?
Yes.
Outside of the takes involved in right-of-way?
Outside, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's good to know.
Any other questions?
One more thing, and that is some conversations from the BPAC cycling community about how the for BRT downtown, there was some question about whether it really optimized both the BRT corridor and the bicycle community, the high-quality separated facilities for bicycles downtown. Is there some more discussion going on about that?
Yes, there is more. I'm scheduled to go back and continue that conversation on September 16. Right now, we probably will start focusing on not just downtown, but because we have larger projects, it makes more sense to look at the overall corridor and buy accommodations along the entire, say, New Bern, because we are moving through design with that now, but we will be continuing that conversation. I know there are some concerns about what was presented in the downtown plan. As was discussed, the downtown plan was not really locking us into certain decisions. It did provide us a blueprint to start laying out BRT through downtown,
Right.
But there's still more room for discussion and modification if needed.
This is hugely exciting for those of us who have been talking about sustainable growth patterns based on transit mobility, to see it finally coming so close. And it looks like it's, you guys are giving it a lot of careful thought. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Did anyone else have a question?
Yep,
Yes,
Mayor,
sir.
quick question. So what's the determining factors, and I know that is premature at this point, but the number of stations and the distance between stations, what's the determining factors for that?
Determining factor for what?
Locations?
Oh,
And
locations.
numbers.
I mean, there are several different factors, but if I would have to just pick two, existing ridership today, because before we do anything else, we want to serve the existing riders that made this corridor successful for transit. And another consideration is development patterns or growth patterns. So we work closely with planning to understand where some of those opportunity areas would be, to make sure we're not missing a critical location that will be a successful transit station in the future. Oh, and the half-a-mile spacing, yes, between
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
The spacing between stations is approximately half a mile, but it's again, give or take. That's not
okay.
locked in, but that's a general rule of thumb to start thinking about where to put those dots.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question.
In terms of whether it's a downtown or a two-way pair or a segment, those determinations were made by ridership or development patterns that are going to come along the corridor? How were they determined?
The running way options, so the running way design options, basically what that roadway looks like. That first, the biggest question is, do you have space? And what that space looks like. We're more constrained downtown. There was really one option, having dedicated lanes on the right, just to make sure that it works with all the other users and parking and loading docks and all the stuff that's happening downtown. One-way pair, again, we considered a couple of different options on the right and left. Right makes more sense because you can place it on either. Left is more challenging technically, so if you're not gaining the benefit of speed or reliability, why go through more challenging design where you're accomplishing the same thing with getting something more straightforward. And then the final, that the segment between Tarboro and Wake Med, we had 3 different options that we shared with the community. The one I shared with you today received the most interest because this is the most reliable BRT that you can build. It's completely dedicated, there's no conflict, vehicles get in the lanes and they just go, and there's also opportunity to do some nice landscaping, to buffer and to create more visual interest, plant some trees, and it's just the best BRT you can build. So because we have a luxury along New Bern to have that space, that's the best treatment you can do for the system.
And does that also mean in some areas we're going to have to shift the lanes over? I know we can't take lanes away, but we'll have to probably shift some over.
In some, we would have to, because while in that specific segment, we're trying to stay within the repurpose the median, but we are still adding the landscaping and keeping the general purpose lanes. The physical curbs will shift, but it still will be within the NCDOT right away, and we are working with NCDOT to make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So your second item, thank you, Mayor and Council, and also want to just say thank you to the staff. Multi-departmental staff work, although transportation is often up front, there's a lot of other folks that are working on that. So thank you for your support and for the hard work of the staff. Second item is a follow-up to an earlier question that was posed by the council about art programs within the city and looking at that from a geographic distribution perspective. This was also an item that was in your strategic plan, and this request was made many months ago. Sorry we hadn't brought it back sooner. We've had some scheduling conflicts, and this is an item that's kind of gotten bumped, but better late than never. The purpose of today is to really share that information and get any feedback you may have as we continue to grow our art programs in the city and make sure that we're serving all of our citizens. So with that, Sarah Powers with our Office of Public Art, or Art is here. Sorry,
yes,
Art overall. Thanks.
Good morning. Thanks for, or good afternoon. Thanks for having us. We're excited to show off what we've been doing in our newly acquired mapping skills. I have with me Kelly McChesney, our Public Art Director, to go into, she'll do some of the public art discussion points to go into the details a little bit better than I can. I wanted to give you a little overview about what we want to talk about, because this is a big question in many ways. Not only are the context and our guiding documents that were set forward with the Raleigh Arts Plan, but there's strategic plan initiatives around this effort. We would
There,
show
pull,
you.
you can pull the mic a little
Sorry,
closer
there's
to
a
you.
keyboard in the way. Is that better?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
That's better.
We also want to go over some of the mapping exercises that can kind of show you how our program has developed over the year. Public art specifically has grown exponentially since the program was put in place about 10 years ago. And then we'll talk about some of the strategies, because we're piloting a lot of great things and switching around our processes to get more community input and being able to turn that around to make sure the art we're spreading out is in fact what the community wants and needs. Some of you were around when this was adopted. This was a 2016, the council adopted a community-focused arts plan. Raleigh Arts and the Public Art and Design Board and the Arts Commission have leadership in accomplishing the goals and objectives put forth through that, but it is a community plan, and our colleagues with the United Arts Council, our arts partners groups, our community, all have ways to help get the work done in that plan. I did want to point out one of the big changes that was made in the adoption of that plan is getting art outside of what we had been doing kind of to this point, which is using it as a tool to build a new downtown, gathering people, bringing folks to our amenities downtown, filling our theaters. There's great reasons for that. The artists get a lot of exposure being downtown. It's really exciting, and we've done some great work. Our downtown is awesome. And now we've got a little bit of a bandwidth to start moving it out and forward. And we certainly learned through this that our community is, throughout the city, very interested in expanding their access to the art. The strategic plan initiative, 2.4, is working pretty much very in the weeds, doing inventories, figuring out strategies to increase access to the arts through what we can do internally. They've looked at what is in our area and corridor plans. Our planning efforts throughout the city often point out opportunities where the community is interested. They've expressed their interest. They have great ideas. We can look into that. It's one of their first exercises. But they're also looking at tools. If we're building a new building, if we're a wonderful bus and rapid transit systems coming in, where are there opportunities and what does that mean? Art isn't everybody's first language, but we've been able to work with them to say, hey, if you want to exhibit artwork, that's pretty easy. Do you have a wall, maybe some light, or something like the shimmer wall, something more integrated, something in that scale. This is another end of the spectrum to build a museum or something specifically art. There's a big spectrum, but art can be involved in all the levels in most all of our facilities. And I think you would have seen this about a year ago in your strategic plan, but it just kind of points out these are where the area plans are, and they could kind of showcase. So it's a tool we can use. These are where the community has said we're interested. The white area doesn't mean anything is not going to be there. It's just there aren't area plans that have been inventoried for this purpose. And now I'll turn it over to Kelly. I will say, since Kelly's been on board about a year and a half, our public art program has really, really expanded, so I'm excited that she can showcase some of that.
All right, thank you. So we've been working with people to help us map all of the art throughout the history with GIS, and I think that has helped us to see what we actually have and where we're going with it. We typically have 4 main types of public art that we consider. There's acquisitions, which can be donations, it can be community commissions, it could be art commission for specific purposes, such as the Acorn for the bicentennial of the city of Raleigh. There's a percent for art, which everybody should know, which is follows the CIP construction. And temporary public art is a program that we use because it's more flexible. I can engage more people, more community members. We can be more responsive to the needs and requests of community members, and also the local artists in the community have more of a chance to be involved and to showcase their artwork. And then there is also the newer citizen-initiated program, which is people who want to do art in their neighborhood or on city property. They want to know how, and we can help them move forward with that. So those are the 4 types that we map currently. Just to show you, before the public art program started, it was mostly acquisitions. You'll see here the purple stars. So there were 15 permanent works of art and 2 temporary public works of art during that time. And then this is a more current vision from when the public art program started to today. So you'll see that the percent for art is in the red bubbles and the acquisitions are purple, and then the temporary public art is kind of our way that we can do a lot more and spread it out, and those are the yellow circles there. Just to go into distribution by type, acquisitions tends to stay inside the Beltline because a lot of people want high profile areas or it's more collaborative. The shimmer wall is an example of that, as is, I have some examples here. Opie and Andy, the sculpture at Poland Park, was commissioned by TV Land for that park specifically, and then of course the MLK Gardens was commissioned by the community for that location. So it tends to be for acquisitions, a little bit higher profile areas, but we are working to try and spread that out into other parks throughout the city. The Percent for Art program, this is currently where we are. We've completed 11 projects to date, and they typically follow construction projects, or in the past they have followed construction projects. But the Public Art and Design Board has been using a criteria matrix to ensure that they are paying attention to equity, to access, what points of interest are around, is there walkability, and other points like that. And these are some examples. The public art piece at Buffalo Road was the first Percent for Art piece in 2012. That was the top image there. And then we move on to things like Halifax Park, which has integrated sculpture and worked with the community to do that. And then the Equilibrium at the Communication Center, which has another functional, it serves a function is to kind of stop people from coming too close to the building, but you can sit and enjoy the art as well. And the temporary public art program is the biggest as far as being able to produce the most projects and in a quicker time period. We've completed about 148 so far. And here are some examples. In this for many years. We also include the Together Raleigh bus wraps, performances in the city, and special projects such as the projection mapping at St. Agnes. And this is just a view of our kind of planned and in progress public art projects. This is just what we know is happening now, what's been allocated. We know more will be coming, but it's a view of the future, and you'll see we're starting to try and spread out.
Speaking of trying to spread out, I don't really see much of anything in District E. Are there plans to change that? I mean,
Yes.
it's pretty glaringly obvious.
So there are, and then there is with more temporary public art, but there is specifically, I think, another 1 or 2 public art projects that are on hold because they're with the streetscape projects that just happened. And I think one in that district that the Public Art and Design Board wants to focus on it's on hold for more community engagement. So we're waiting to see about that. So we're just showing what's been allocated so far, but there will be more. And that is, especially Lake Lynn area, we are looking. I just did a tour of all the parks in that district recently.
Thank you.
Same as your District A.
And so just to give you some examples of plan in progress. So we have an example of an acquisition, which is the Capital City Bridges you see. Chavis is a Percent for Art project, and then we have a temporary project happening at all of the outdoor pools where an artist is working with those aquatic centers to update their fences. Okay.
So we don't say we've got everything right and there's not art everywhere yet. So we're just getting started. And understanding that we can all work collaboratively to get there is, I think, really key, because as we expand the program, Kelly can get into detail, but community public art, the storm drain, something like that can take a few weeks, whereas we can look at 5 years to get something for the Percent for Art program. So we want to have a range of ways to get projects going and be responsive to the community. So the first thing, and we mentioned it briefly, but looking at how public art projects and not only the allocation of funds and how those decisions are made, we did sort of expand what they're looking, what they're considering, and putting tools in place similar to how we would allocate grant funding, so that they're kind of scored and looked at, so that all of the things from project opportunity to geographic distribution are taken into place. Also, if we have community connections or information like that, what's the impact? Those things can be put into consideration too. And luckily, we have these decisions to make now. The program has grown enough that it's not just stuck with whatever facility is going. There is the full percent, and the way the projects are coming in, there's a little bit more decision making there, which is going to be very helpful as we go forward. And Councilmember Crowder, this project the punch list is almost there.
Almost there.
So,
It's looking great.
yeah, it is. Thank you. Our community centers and parks are very much spread out through the city. So we focus most of our pilot projects, figuring out how we can make this work, how we can get everybody on the team excited and comfortable with how it can work. Pop-up studios, we can talk about, sort of arts programming. If there was an art center in your neighborhood, what would it look like? What age would it serve? What materials would it do? So they've gone through tons of exercises and testing, not only what materials, which age groups, what time of day, but how does marketing work best in each neighborhood? How are we going to be able to, is it drop-in? Is it pre-registration? Things like that. And they've got a lot of good data that we can now leave behind. The Creative Paging Project, Sensory Friendly Saturdays are a great pilot for us to look at our community members that maybe aren't participating in arts because the programmatic opportunities might be far away from them, but reaching out, or they've got other barriers. But you saw on the map, the temporary public art is a great way for us to be responsive to the community, include local artists, and you really use it as a gathering tool, from the picnic, the living picnic project at Dix Park, to how we partnered with St. Augustine's to do the mapping storage project at St. Agnes last fall, which really did tell the story of a very important community site that a lot of folks had not really been able to understand the significance of that site, but through a great partnership with the Museum of Art and these artists who came in from Austria but worked with 27 different local artists and students to really use technology as a way to tell the story of our history, but and also sort of activate a space that there's a lot of potential. The pop-up studios, like I said, brought in a lot of information. Part of the city this size, we want to make sure if we're going to invest in new art programs that they're sort of collaborative with the communities we're serving. So our community centers in the summer of 2019, obviously, lots of art opportunities and centers. This would change a little bit based on the sort of leisure ledger opportunities, what we can pull out of our system. But when we looked at the pop-up studios, we could sort of see that there was using facilities that didn't already have them and could spread it out a little bit more. And also giving a good amount of information about who's going to come by, how's it going to work, and what's the best thing to offer. Some of the data, this is a Raleigh zip code map, so it looks a little different than the other ones. But you can see the heat map, the darker green is by where the facilities are. So those pop-up studios, we did worry that we would put an art class in a new facility and the same people that were missing Pullen Art Center would just haul on over to the new one. But we did see a lot of really localized engagement. So that was good. Thesis proven, we can keep doing that. The other thing that's important is we spread it out and we're not looking at those like draw people downtown kind of public art opportunities. Just listening to the community, engaging the community, and building the relationships first is really important. We have great resources through all the area plans, through the arts plans. Those feedback, it's a great way to get started, but we also try to actively host listening sessions. Our public art community engagement now has a first step that they talk to the community before the artist selection criteria are set, so then they're much more likely to see their feedback instead of waiting till the artist is in place. So I think that's going to really transform how we look at, especially those bigger capital projects going forward. The pilots allow us to have data, allow us to meet new people and kind of track what success is so that we can roll it out into new areas with a good success rate. And we're hoping to kick off the public art plan development, which will even help us look into bigger policy issues, look at how to take some of these pilots forward, as well as look at holistically the whole city's public art plan. Being able to match artists with communities, being able to engage local artists, connecting everything, working on how to integrate all that feedback is an important part of what we do, but it seems to really help make the project sticky, and setting the artist criteria based on what the community needs. Is it the most aesthetically pleasing, or is it the artist that's going to really engage with the community and best with the students that are at that community center? So now we can redesign how we choose an artist using some national practices that give stickiness or community engagement or educational opportunities and beyond.
Do you think you squelch the artist's ability to produce something when you have that many criteria about what can and can't be done? Have you found that to be part of the stickiness?
I'd say one thing we've really kind of figured out is that if you have all that brought in after the artist is chosen, you're asking a particular artist with a particular ability to do A, B, and C, whatever it is. But if you start with what are these things that is valued? Is it storytelling? Is it creating a place? Is it something interactive and colorful, and then you choose an artist, you advertise for those kind of artists, you're much more likely to have someone who's going to easily work with a community to get what they need, instead of saying, oh, we love this thing he makes things out of bricks, but you guys really want a bright, colorful, interactive piece. That's a lot harder to manage those relationships, and then harder to see that feedback as it goes forward, because it's harder to really make an artist do something wildly different than what they're good at, and not a good use of anybody's time or money, because they're better to be a little freedom, for sure. So this is a map that shows the different city-initiated projects, but also the citizen-initiated. So getting back into how we can empower our community, we have a process that goes through the Arts Education Committee of our Arts Commission and the Arts Commission Public Art and Design Board if it's a big enough project. And that allows anybody to come forward with a percent for art project, or not percent for art project, opposite of that. They're a community-initiated project. They have an idea, they want to donate a sculpture, they want to put something, put a mural up at a community center. It's for projects on city property. It's reviewed, it's looked at, is this going to be safe? If it's temporary, is it going to be removed? Is it, it's going to add value? And it helps sort of shepherd those through. Everyone can get all the right permits and there's no surprises. But it also allows our office to be kind of a concierge, so that help everybody navigate what can be a really intimidating process to get the permissions, both from the site managers to the community, because who to call, how do I advocate for permissions, but our office can handle that pretty easily. We usually have a couple a year. We had 18 this year.
Nice.
And then we got a bunch of television about them. So we think that'll really, really grow. The sewer ups project that we saw, and the Sandra Wimblish's project at Laurel Hill at Sassafras, really, really beautiful. They look good. They've gotten some attention, so we're trying to make sure everything we're doing is ready to accommodate more and more folks interested in making their own projects on city property. Another thing we're about to roll out, the Neighborhood Improvement Fund, is something I'm sure you're familiar with, but we're testing an art version of it, be similar in process, but it would be, our office would be able to help articulate what does this mean, how can you do it, what are the big ideas, what are the artists we can connect folks with, so we're hoping to get that out soon. We've also had wonderful partnerships with other city departments who have used arts to raise awareness about, storm drains, to activate downtown streets, to create pedestrian safety and make a bike rack a really festive place downtown. We're also looking at some pilot projects with transportation for signal boxes and things like that would be able to roll. Once we've piloted it, we know what it's going to cost. We can prepare folks to go forward and get it done on their own. And they've gotten great success. We also partner through funding and capacity building with arts organizations throughout the city that represent many different art forms, places in the city, different stories to tell, as well as different cultural activities. And we look at that as a way to keep arts active everywhere, because if the community's creating them and we can invest in what they're doing and allow them the creative freedom to do it. So when questions,
Anyone have any questions?
ideas.
Y'all doing a fantastic
Yes.
job.
Y'all are doing a great job. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Just a comment is that you had a pop-up art studio for several days in Brentwood Community Center,
We did.
and I've received a lot of very good compliments about that.
Thank you. That was one of our really fun projects. They did and they activated the community center. There's all different art classes. I even took an art class. It's pretty cool. It's a neat community center. But they also did there's a little walking trail. They had sidewalk murals, and just to test, hey, if the folks are just there passively, or actually they're all running and jogging, they're not really, but could we get some more attention? Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Nothing else? The meeting?
That's it.
Okay, meeting's adjourned. Call to order this meeting of the Raleigh City Council. First item we have is the invocation from Bishop Ron Collette from the Stone Church.
God bless you. Shall we bow our heads today? Heavenly Father, we thank you today, Lord, for the divine privilege of being a part of your work in this city. Thank you for these leaders that are before us today. Thank you for all of the protection that you give. Thank you for everything that you've done in this city and you continue to do. Lord, your scripture says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Lord, we want to thank you today that ultimately you are the keeper of this city. And we give you praise today for that. We thank you, Lord God, for these who are here. Lord, it has been said that we are the possessors of nothing, but the stewards of everything. Thank you today, God, for stewardship amongst the leaders of our great city. Thank you today that, Lord, your wind will blow through the city of Oaks again. We thank you, God, that in this moment it is our privilege to say that we have faith and confidence ultimately in your will for our city. So we bless these leaders today. We bless all of those who are here to do business, that ultimately the city will rejoice. In Jesus Christ's matchless name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Mr. Branch, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, I hope you all will indulge me for a couple minutes because I've been gone for a while. I just wanted to take a few minutes to say a few things. It's great to be back, and I appreciate everybody I've bumped into welcoming me back, and that means a lot. But before I say anything else, I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Corey Branch for presiding over the council during my absence. Thank you so much, Corey, for stepping up to the plate. I really appreciate it. I know it was a lot of work. I also want to thank the council for passing the budget without increasing taxes. That was a feat unto itself. I know you had a lot to do with that, so thank you so much for working that out. 2019 has been a very hard year for me personally and for our community. I think many of you know I underwent multiple back surgeries over the span of 4 months, requiring far more time to recover than I ever anticipated. And I want to acknowledge the impact of that gap. I appreciate and knowing that you elected me to lead and I was unable to be fully present in that sacred contract. I regret that this happened, and I regret that the impact it's had on the productivity and frankly some of the civility in the council. I want you to know that there has been no greater honor in my life than to serve as your mayor. It's no accident that Raleigh is one of the greatest cities in America. Our people and our ingenuity are what have made this place special. Sadly, we recently lost one of our greatest placemakers, Steve Schuster. Steve is the finest example of someone who is truly dedicated to his community. He lived what he believed. And although he is already dearly missed, his spirit will live on through countless designs we will see daily across town, such as the Raleigh Convention Center, the Marbles Children's Museum, and of course, Union Station. I want to celebrate and thank every single person who makes Raleigh the thriving community that it is. I am proud to have given 12 years of my life in public service to Raleigh, and there is still work to be done, and I'm definitely back and fired up and ready to move forward. So I'd like to encourage my fellow city councilors to embrace a tone of collaboration and cooperation as we work together for the remaining time that we sit here as an elected body. It's my hope that we can move forward and focus on governing, not campaigning from the table. As mayor and council, we set the tone for our city. We have an official code of conduct, and even if you didn't vote for it, we're still obligated to follow it. We owe that to our citizens and to each other. Let's not let the toxic climate of the national political landscape poison the local well. The reputation of the Raleigh City Council has always been one of mutual respect between council members, citizens, and staff, and I want us to get back on that track. So let's get to it. And what's next? So that takes us to the consent agenda, and we have 2 items to be pulled, item D7 and item J4. Are there any other items any council member wishes to pull at this time?
Move for
Motion.
approval of the balance.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the first item is D7, and that is Mayor Pro Tem Branch.
Yes, I want to take a chance to follow with the owner here of the pawn shop. So once I have that conversation, should be able to
Okay, so if
move
there's,
forward in probably about 2 weeks.
all right, so if there's no objection, we'll hold this item and bring it back at the next meeting in 2 weeks. The next item is J4, which is Councilor Cox.
Yes, I'm actually going to recommend that we approve this item, but what I would like to do is also ask that we send an item to Growth and Natural Resources to look more closely into nutrient banking and to look more closely into the levels of nutrients that we are discharging into the Neuse River. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the item, and then
So would you rather get a report from staff on what is existing and,
right, if they could present that at GNR, that would be great, so we could have a more fuller discussion.
You're asking to put it in GNR, Mr. Cox?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
okay, do we need to vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that takes us to the report of the Planning Commission.
Mayor and council, as they're coming forward, I would, just for the purposes of the audience, like to recognize Roger Walden is helping us right now serve as our interim planning director through some staff issues that are going on personally. So Roger has graciously agreed to help us for a few weeks to bridge that gap, and Ken will be back, but just wanted to, for folks wondering who this person is at the podium, it's Roger Walden. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruffin, and it is a privilege and honor to be able to be here with you and to be helping during Ken's absence, and I appreciate the chance to do that.
Okay, it looks like the first item, the comp plan amendment CP 319, we are being asked to set a public hearing date of September 3rd. Do I have a motion for that?
May I ask how many things we have on September 3rd currently?
Do you know?
2, 3, 4,
How
6.
We
We have 2 comp plans, we have a zoning case, we have the Avon Fair area study, and we have a text change and also a zoning text change.
Okay, so on this agenda, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items being recommended for September 3rd.
And we already have how many on?
1 for October and, actually 6 for September 3rd, 1 for October, and 1 is a request for 90 days.
So why don't we split, if there's 4, take 2 for September?
Pick 2 for September,
The next meeting in September, the other 2? What do you think?
that's fine. Unless you want to put them in October, so they're in the evening.
Yeah, we could do, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah, October.
So we can take number 2 and number 3, comprehensive plan amendment CP 319 and text change TC 1019, and place them for public hearing on September 3rd. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then rezoning Z 1519, comp plan amendment CP 919, rezoning Z 1319, and text change TC 1019, and place them for public hearing on September 3rd. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
All in favor? Opposed? And then rezoning Z 1519, comp plan amendment CP 919, rezoning Z 1319, rezoning Z 1319, and text change TC 1019, and place them for public hearing on September 3rd. And comp plan amendment CP 819 would be on October,
First meeting.
first meeting in October, October 1st.
October 1st.
Do I have a motion for that?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then lastly, we have a request for a 90-day extension for rezoning Z619 for the consideration of additional zoning conditions. Does anybody have any questions, or do we have a motion to allow the
Move.
90-day?
Move to approve extension.
Second.
Huh?
I'd move to approve
Okay.
the extension.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. I just would like to make a comment that I've been to a lot of planning boards and commissions in my role as a consultant planner, and I'm very impressed with your planning commission.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, that takes us to special items.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just the first one I'll go ahead and introduce as the staff comes forward to make the presentation. This is a follow-up on Crabtree Creek Trail alignment at structure, what is known as Structure 106, which is had some damage associated with several hurricanes, flooding events, and so you also were gracious enough to add some money in the budget for us to try to respond to this, and staff has several options that we'd like to bring for your attention. We're going to be proposing one, and that's one of the things. Folks in the community, as well as nearby citizens and property owners, that would like this to get opened as quickly as possible. And so once we had the funding identified in the budget, staff has worked really hard to try to bring those options back for your attention. So we would look for your direction today to move forward. With that, I'll turn it over to David Bender with our Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department to help respond to that.
Thank you, Ruffin.
All right.
Good afternoon, Mayor. It's good to see you back, Councilman. I'm David Bender. I'm Capital Projects Manager with Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources. I'm the project manager for the Structure 106 Boardwalk project. And the purpose of this agenda today is to request approval from this board to proceed with the design recommendations for the alignment of option 1, we call the North Bank alignment of the Crabtree Creek Greenway, which is located north of Capitol Boulevard and west of the I-440 and near Ratchford Drive. This recommendation was presented at the Greenway Urban Tree Subcommittee, and we also presented this recommendation to the Northeast and the Atlantic CAC meetings to get their feedback and input, and also the park board members were invited to those meetings to participate. So Structure 106, it's about a 1,200-foot long elevated timber boardwalk, was constructed in 2003 as part of the Middle Creek Greenway. When it was constructed, the construction was consistent with the approved methods of the similar design of capillary Greenway facilities. The current alignment of Structure 106 was located where it is today is because when we're developing these greenways, we generally try to locate adjacent to streams in buffer areas within flood-prone areas. With residential development and buffer widths ranging from 50 to 150 feet, these stream banks generally are dedicated, and we try to locate these facilities, which is why we are so close to this Crabtree Creek. Since the completion of the construction in 2003, over time through several high rain events and storms, the banks of the stream have eroded and have caused scouring of the concrete piers, subsequently leading to structure failures. Example is in April 2018, 2 sections of the structure failed as a result of Hurricane Matthews, and since 2018, additional sections have failed, and the photograph that you see there is one of those recent failures. This has caused a lot of public frustration because of the closures. It has become a safety hazard simply because of the dangers of the failure of the structure. It really is an emergency repair to try to get this connection completed. This is an idea of where the alignment is located. It's important to reestablish the connectivity of this trail, which is located at mile marker 7. It's important for this improvement to provide for continued connectivity from the Crabtree Valley and the Umstead Park region in the west and allows for a connection over to the Neuse River and Anderson Point. It's a key connectivity, and in order to continue that connectivity for commuters and other users, this is an important alignment for us to construct. In 2019 or 2018, the staff went and created 3 feasibility studies. The first one was option 1, which we call the North Bank alignment. It's designated here in the yellow line. This location is positioned along the north bank of an existing tributary. It follows an existing sanitary sewer, has a small timber boardwalk construction, and utilizes Radford Drive improvements, and it also avoids a tree conservation area. We looked at another option, option 2, which is designated on this map in the blue line. This positions the trail again along the south bank of an existing tributary trail, it accesses the existing elevated timber boardwalk construction, includes a tall timber wall, and again connects to Ratchford Drive. The final option was to rebuild and repair the existing Boardwalk 106, and that's designated in the red line on this map. This would include a new elevated timber boardwalk, steel piles, would require stream bank stabilization, a 1-year flood study before we could begin construction, and significant impact on the adjoining property owners. So in order to try to quantify the decision of which is the best alternative, we created this alignment comparison analysis, which we pulled in key selection criteria, such as acquisition that would be required, structures that would be required, constructability, that could be construction access to the facility, topography, is there steep slopes, is there tree conservation areas, et cetera, maintenance, and total cost. So I'm not going to go through all these, but just for key example is in option 1, there is an existing sewer line. In order to construct this option, it would require an additional easement on top of that existing sewer easement. In the option 2, there would be additional property owners that we'd have to get acquisition and easements from. And on repairing the existing boardwalk, because of the continued movement of that existing creek, it's caused that stream to progressively move towards that boardwalk and into the adjoining properties. In order to safely and create a new structure, we would have to move that boardwalk into that adjoining property owner, those 2 car lots that are located there, and that would have significant impact on the usability and the commercial viability of those 2 commercial properties. And then there are other issues here regarding the number of structures, how easy it is for us to get equipment into there to construct, how much maintenance, and what are the number of maintenance because of the structures, and finally, total cost. So staff has made the recommendation for option 1, the North Bank option, and our justification in these bullets is it creates there are minimal environmental impacts because it isn't an existing sewer easement, so it is a cleared level area. It's much more sustainable because of the construction is going to be typical paved greenway construction. It's the least expensive option. It's much easier for our construction crews to be able to get in there. However, there is change there is going to be a change in the character of this trail when we design this new alignment. But of course, as we move into the future and the development of the greenway, there is going to be continued urban feel to our trails, and this is going to be an example of what that kind of transition to a much more urban experience for our users. So we wanted to create some type of user environment along Ratchford Drive that would maximize the experience of the users. What's on the picture on the screen here are just some contextual ideas of what we would possibly consider. It would be some form of 2-way shared protected path. It would have some kind of vertical protection, possibly colored pavement, landscaping, planters, some form that's going to be really the long-range plan for Ratchford Road in the future. Roughly a 6 to 7 month design period, going through permitting and acquisition of property, We would hope to be, by fall of '20, to be issuing a awarding construction bid and a notice to proceed. And again, 8-9 months for final construction would be summer '20.
Or deliver kind of thing. How confident are you in this schedule?
Anytime you go into construction, if we have another kind of rainy season like we've had in the past years, that is going to always have impact. Materials, availability of contractors, which we also have a challenge trying to get. We try to create these projects as attractive as we can for our local and regional contractors. So we try to take into account any of those factors and try to work that into our schedule and hope for the best.
Okay.
We don't feel that this is going to have an impact on any other projects. We're able to focus our design team and our staff on this project as well as continue their focus on other projects.
Okay, thank you.
Wouldn't it be kind of safe to say that this is best case scenario here, timeline?
I'm sorry.
Best case?
Oh, for schedule?
Yes.
Yes. I would have to agree. It is best case. And if everything goes well, we would try to expedite that. We do try to be very conservative in our timeline estimates. So if best case, we would try to be able to get it done even sooner. But right now, we're estimating it around mid-2021 for completion.
I have a question concerning the existing structure that's not in use. What are the plans for those materials?
Right now, there are no plans for recycling that existing timber. Majority of that timber was constructed in 2003. The weathering impact on that timber structure since that time has caused some decay to that material. The usefulness of those wood timbers for any kind of significant structural reuse would be concerning. But if there is any way to do anything to recycle, such as any of the new beams that we've put in, if any way that we can try to pull those and reuse those otherwise, then we would like to be able to do that, and we would entertain feedback and suggestions of how we could do that. But in this specific scope that we have right now, we have not defined a recycling effort.
Okay. And will that current structure that's not usable be removed?
It is the intention that part of the construction contract would be removal of the existing structure, not including the part of the trail that we repaired back in 2018. We would retain that portion of the structure.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'm going to make a motion to approve.
I have a question.
I'll second that.
Real quick question. Will there be a connection to the Avenue apartment community so that they can have access to the Greenway?
Right now, actually, I'll go back to the picture if it's okay. Just to the west of that yellow line and green line, there are existing access points for all the apartment complexes along there. If you follow west along that existing paved, you'll see that there are existing paths that are cut along that trail.
Yeah, I'm looking at a map and I see one, and it goes to there is a Raleigh Greenway access point to the apartment complex that's adjacent, but there's a significant tree line between the two apartment complexes, and it doesn't look like there's access between the two apartment complexes.
It's hard to see on these maps, but if you'll go through, there are paths that the renters and the residents in those complexes have used to access. As far as a specific design structure that we're going to construct in order to allow access along Ratchford, that's not part of our scope.
Okay, because I can kind of hear people saying, well, we've got a greenway right there, but we can't even walk to it. So is that something we could consider?
I think if we want to include that in further design to evaluate the accessibility of those properties, we certainly can do that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, didn't you just say there are paths that allow the apartments to access the Greenway?
There are.
So they're private. I'm Lisa Schiffbar. I manage the Greenway planning section. There are paths. They're like social paths that the residents have made on their own. They're not formal accesses. They're dirtway pathways that access the paved section of the Greenway.
Because, on Ratchford, there's very significant, in addition to the avenues on the north side of Ratchford, there's very significant apartment complexes. So there's probably thousands of residents in these apartment complexes, and it just would seem like a shame that we were going to put in this greenway trail and these residents in these apartments can't have easy access to the trail.
The access, if you're looking at the map and if you're looking at where Ratchford ends and eventually will continue on, will connect to the remaining part of Ratchford.
Right.
I don't know what the timeline is on that, but when that happens, there will be a connection made. In the meantime, that would require a very major switchback construction and add cost to the project. When the residents of this community can access by their social path that they have created on their own through the wooded area.
Okay, well, we continually hear that we don't give enough deference to our residents that live in rental units, and so I guess I do have to express concern. I mean, I will approve this plan, but I have concerns that we're not really doing enough to be able to provide easy access to these residents.
I think that's something we can continue to look at for future connections with our Neighborhood Connections program, something that we are looking at access to the Capital Area Greenway. So it's something that we're not going to ignore, but I think to move this project along, and in order to get this main pathway constructed and opened so that there is connectivity reestablished, I think that's the goal here. These residents do have access. It may not be a formal access, but there is access.
Okay.
So I'm going to restate. I'd like to make a motion to approve option 1 for the Crabtree Trail alignment at structural number 106.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have zoning conditions, case TCZ 219. Let's do it 2 weeks in the afternoon. Yeah, do it in the afternoon. What day is that? 17. Oh, it's not plugged in.
I apologize. Thought I was in the right place. Here we go. Okay. TCZ-2-19 is for 4501 Durley Road. This is a request to amend the conditions associated with zoning case Z-40-01. This application was originally heard at the council meeting on June the 4th. It was at that time that it was requested that this application be presented to the Northwest CAC for their review and a vote. They did review this application request on June the 11th and heard it again on July the 9th for a vote. It was there that they received a favorable vote of 9-1 in support of the application. In the interest of time and the lengthy agenda that we have ahead, I would say that none of the conditions that were originally brought before, presented to the council, have been modified or changed in any way. So it's the same application. It was just deferred for the purposes of letting it go to the CAC for their vote. The staff is recommending that this item be placed on the September 3rd public hearing agenda.
Okay, well, as we discussed earlier, I think we already have at least 10 things on the September 3rd. What about September 17th?
Works for me.
Would that be all right? Do you have any objection to that? So no objection, or I guess I need a motion to,
Motion to move to the 17th of September.
Second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the Cameron Village Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District update. Is there, do we have a staff presentation?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Hi, Matthew Clem, City Planning. Mayor and council have a brief update for a potential neighborhood conservation overlay district for the Cameron Village neighborhood. As a reminder, NCODs are zoning tools that are used to alter the base dimensional standards of existing zoning. They are usually more restrictive than the existing zoning, and they apply additional development standards to neighborhoods. Your reminder on process here, the process was initiated in May when you received a petition from citizens. At that time, you directed staff to engage in the second step of the process, which is a neighborhood study. We've completed that study and shared the results of the study with the neighborhood, Cameron Village neighborhood, on July 25th, and now we're reporting out to you. The third step in the process and the decision that you'll make today will be whether or not to authorize the text change. That process would entail the creation of a new zoning district for the Cameron Village neighborhood. If that text change was approved, the final step in the process would be mapping that new zoning district to the zoning map. This is the area we studied. It's in Cameron Village, and it's bound by Wade Avenue, Daniel Street, Smallwood Drive, and James Place. It's about 120 homes. And the characteristics we studied, as outlined in the petition, were lot size and width, building height, building setbacks, and distance between buildings. And to conduct that study, we first looked at the subdivision plan that created the Cameron Village neighborhood in the 1950s. And that subdivision plan created 200 recorded lots. And many of those lots still exist today. So those lots were sold off in pairs of 2 and 3. And the deeded property record for the neighborhood has a configuration where the 120 property owners actually own multiple parcels each. And that's important because our zoning regulation applies to recorded property lines, not deeded parcels. And so the Unified Development Ordinance would consider these lots non-conforming lots of record. And what the code says about those lots is that in any zoning district where a single-family home is permitted, it may be built on a non-conforming lot of record so long as the new structure conforms with all the other zoning regulation. And so what does that mean for this study? Well, we looked at a number of criteria as outlined in the petition, but based on the code's compliance with non-conforming lots of record, the only regulation that an NCOD could include for this area would be front and rear yard setback and building height. And so if you look at the disparity between these standards, existing R6 and the predominant value of which we report on, you'll see that there is a potential for an NCOD to kind of bridge the gap and otherwise typify the built environment of the neighborhood. So we shared all that information at a community meeting on July 25th, and at that meeting, 30 of the 32 attendees voted to request that City Council give them some extra time before authorizing the third step in the process. There's just general differences of opinion of how or whether or not to proceed with the process, and the community has requested more time to organize and work together to build consensus. So just your reminder of process, we've completed steps 1 and 2. The decision you're making today would be to whether or not authorize the text change and continue the process, defer for 60 days as the community has requested, and again, the final step would be rezoning, and I'm happy to answer any questions for you.
So, okay. Well, go ahead, because
I just had my question is 60 days enough time?
That was what was indicated. That would bring this decision back before you in October sometime.
So this is an area in the city that's well-loved, the Cameron Village area. But as I've always said, NCODs are between the community, and it's decided amongst the community what they're looking for. I've had several people call and many people email And I think what I'm overall hearing is that they'd like to look at it and have a little bit more discussion. So I say we defer this for the 60 days so the community can decide what's best for their community.
Can I ask a question? I'd heard from a lot of people also, and I'd heard 120, they were wanting 120 days.
Yeah, I heard
I've heard that as
122,
well.
but
Well, I think
Sure,
more
I think,
time the better.
sure. What, the discussion we had at the public meeting was specifically for 60 days, but if you've had indication of other requests for time, I think that is fine.
Y'all want to split it at 90?
Let's split it at 90, yeah.
All right, I'll second that.
So I will amend that to say 90 days versus 60 days. And I think it's important that NCODs are one tool of many, and that communities need to agree on it. So if the community can get comfortable with whether they want it or not, the council will be happy to entertain whatever they decide.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second to delay this for 90 days to give the community opportunity for further conversation. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, on this point, Councilmember Cutter and I have had some conversations about NCODs generally, and whether the tool is working quite the way we want it to, in terms of preserving affordability, in terms of allowing an abundance of diverse housing options to exist throughout our city. And I would like to make a motion to have Growth and Natural Resources look at the tool of NCODs in a big picture way. And if
Yeah, so Nicole and I have had lots of conversations about the tool as it is today and what it could look like moving forward, where it might need some tweaking, holistically looking at them. And I told her that I thought a good way to do that was to pull it into Growth and Natural Resources, so I'm happy to do that.
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Takes us to the Crosslink Traffic Calming Project. Proposed-
Yes, Mayor and Council, this item is a follow-up from a citizen petition. Staff is here to give you an update about where we are. As you can see in your packet, we're recommending that we proceed with the proposed traffic calming alignment as well as the bus stop, and we will demonstrate that proposal to you. David Eatman with Transportation is here.
All right, so good afternoon. This is a follow-up item to a traffic calming project, but this particular item is not about the traffic calming project at large. It is about the relocation of a bus stop and actually the improvement of a couple of bus stops at a particular intersection. So this is actually the Crosslink Road traffic calming project, a much larger scope than what we're going to talk about today. Specifically, the transit stop, as you can see, where it says existing transit stop to be relocated, that's at the top. That's actually on the east side of Crosslink. We're bringing that down to the intersection. So with the alignment of the intersection, we have stops across from each other, and they're improving that particular intersection with pedestrian improvements as well as bulb outs, which will slow the traffic and actually make that a safer pedestrian area. This is the actual design that we're actually looking at that you saw earlier at the intersection. So as you see at the top of the slide, I'm trying to find my north arrow. Yeah, okay. So that would be on the west side of actually that map. But there is an existing driveway with a bus stop improvement. With pedestrian accommodations. We would actually have a bus shelter at that location. And the subject property that we have that is in conflict currently with the other bus stop location is where it says Dobbin Family Property 1. So that is a property that has about 60 feet of existing frontage on Crosslink. And so certainly that is a small amount of property. The parcel itself is actually fairly large, but that particular, where it has a junction with Crosslink, is very narrow. There's been some discussion about the property itself and how can that property be accessed. That can be accessed through an existing subdivision stub that does exist that we'll see in just a moment. Since this discussion began, we've also gotten a requested driveway permit from the family on this particular map, and you see where it says requested driveway. I believe that has been tentatively approved pending the type of development that will occur on the lot. Certainly driveway permits are usually context sensitive, whether it's a single family residence or whether it's a large commercial property or something that would cause a lot of traffic. I've talked to development services and certainly internally with staff. While it's not optimum, the existing driveway does exist on the other side of the street currently. We are okay with a driveway within that location, especially if it is something such as a single-family residence that doesn't have a large amount of traffic. So we're under the assumption that could certainly be accommodated within this plan, and so the driveway could certainly occur. We would, in that case, probably move the bus stop just a little bit further north of that driveway just to make sure there's clearance and make sure that we don't cause any site issues. That has not been developed yet, but that's what we envision is that bus stop would move just a little bit further north again to provide appropriate spacing, but still could be constructed. Again, as you can tell from the diagram, this is developing bus stops that are across from each other at the intersection with pedestrian connections at the intersection as well. So that's just a summary of obviously the reasoning behind our recommendation to move forward. Safer crossing location, and then also accommodating bicycle lane and limiting conflicts with bikes. And then, as I stated earlier, does not limit property access. There's actually another access, and we'll see that in just a moment in the larger map. But certainly, again, it sounds like that the driveway permit request will be allowed also as long as that property is a single-family residence or something of low impact. This is a description or showing the larger property itself. Again, you can see at the large red arrow, that is where we see the bus stop improvements occurring at that location. We talked about the secondary access. So if this were to be developed into something that was multifamily or some type of subdivision, then the actual required connection would have to come from Australia Drive. They would not allow that to come to that particular property at the existing location off of Crosslink. With that, we're requesting to move forward with the project as designed. Certainly, we understand with that new driveway cut that we'll have to make some small modifications. We don't see that as a major issue. But again, we would like to move forward with the transit improvements that fall possible. Thank you. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I have a question. With this driveway request, have we had a chance to talk to the Dobbin family and see with the shifting this up for that driveway, it resolves their concerns?
It is my understanding that they would still not, they would prefer that the bus stop not be there even if the driveway were to be entered at the proposed location, and that the bus stop were to be moved to the north slightly to accommodate clearance for the driveway. But that is my understanding. I just had the opportunity, we've actually met with the family several times, met on site, staff has, but to be completely honest, I just spoke to the family just a few minutes ago, and that seemed to be their sentiment is that they really weren't in favor of the stop at the existing location, regardless of the allowance of the driveway or not.
Okay.
So David, do we have an existing condition like this anywhere else in the city?
With opposing bus stops and as part of
And the
pedestrian.
driveway.
So I can't rattle one off the top of my head, but certainly with all new traffic calming projects, if we have the ability to improve passenger amenities and pedestrian safety, we're trying to do that with these projects if possible. And I know that has occurred, and I can certainly provide locations where we've done that in other areas. I certainly can't rattle anything off that would be exactly like this particular intersection.
Okay.
There's some similar off of Pool Road that I travel it often. I forgot the street that comes out, but it's near a church. That has this where you have one street coming in and there's a stop not far, and there's a driveway not far from it.
Okay. Any other questions? Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay,
Next item, sorry. Oh, go ahead if you
Go
like.
ahead.
The next item is response to a council member's question regarding alternatives for the calendar options for affordable housing bond referendum. We have staff here available that can answer any questions, but the information is contained in your packet. The short version is if you are interested in placing it on the ballot, you would need to do that by October 5th, which is actually a Saturday, but that's the date that it would be due. Your closest remaining council meeting to that is October 1st. So in other words, at any meeting prior to the date of October 5th, if you wanted something on the March 2020 referendum, you would need to start that process. Now, obviously, if you then wanted to consider the November of 2020 date, then you have more time. And those calendar items are listed in your agenda. So with that, staff is available to answer any questions.
I have a question. Just thinking about past bonds that we've done, we've almost always had a stakeholder discussion process, and obviously there's a lot of different stakeholders in the realm of affordable housing. It's home builders and community development organizations. And have those stakeholders been engaged in any of these conversations?
From the staff perspective, not a formal stakeholder process, no. I think there has been a lot of conversation in the stakeholder community, but I would say there's not been a formal process. We've had various interested parties asking us questions about that, and obviously, if we need to, Larry Jarvis or others can speak better to what that looks like, but we have not conducted a formal process.
Is that something we've always done prior to
Doing bonds?
bonds in the past?
So
The last one, it was before he came.
The last affordable housing bond referendum was
11, I think.
It was 2011, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that
That's why I'm
correct?
asking, 'cause it's
And I
the
don't know
first
what the
one.
process was before that.
I don't know what the process is.
So, and if I may, you and I have had conversations somewhat about this, and of course, in the past, what we've had is a independent entity that has run a bond campaign, and typically they're the ones who've done a lot of that outreach. They've had a speakers bureau and obviously done other kind of promotional activities, and so I have been in contact with both the chamber, Adrian Cole, and Wake Up Wake County, Susan Perry, who's the chair of their board. I'm actually meeting with Susan later this week, and both of them have said that they are interested in discussing this more. They were concerned about the limited timing for a 2019 bond, which is passed now, but are interested in discussing a March 2020 bond. And so what I would like to do is give them some indication that we are serious about doing this, and I think we can do that today by preliminarily saying we prefer the spring 2020 bond, and then to give them some indication that we are interested in moving forward, and then we can have bring them back to have more formal conversations with the council and staff about what kind of involvement they may or may not have interest in here. Of course, understanding that there may be other parties that may want to put together a committee with interest in doing affordable housing. Obviously, there are a huge number of stakeholders who do have interest in that, who may want to do the fundraising and hire just an independent company to run the campaign. I think any of those alternatives is a good one, and I think they're all worth exploring. But so for today, my comment would be, my preference would be to give tentative approval to go with this bond in the spring of 2020, and then we can, again, before October 5th, at the October 1st meeting, we can make a final decision.
So I've never done one of these before, so do you think that, maybe this is to you that have done it before, do you think we have enough time? I agree with you, spring would be better, but do we have enough time to coalesce around meeting with partners who might be able to manage the bond package for us before our next October meeting, where we need to make a firm commitment to a date?
Well, great question. Obviously, both Wake Up and the Chamber have done numerous bond campaigns. It's not any new undertaking for any of them. And again, both of them have expressed some interest in getting involved in it. And it's just a matter of perhaps showing them the presentation that's here today and finding out how their leadership feels about it, and coming back before that October 1st decision date.
Question.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dick.
No, I was just going to say, I think with any bond package that we may issue, we want it to be successful.
Yes.
So I think it would be better, sir, perhaps to talk to these organizations instead of us telling them when we want to have it, getting feedback from them. When do you think you could reasonably do it to make sure of the success of the project?
Right. Well, and yeah, obviously it's a negotiation here, and I'm just saying from our standpoint, if we want them to feel like we're would prefer to move forward sooner, we should just go ahead and tell them we prefer to move forward sooner, and so that would give them an indication of what our level of commitment might be if they wanted to get involved.
I'll say no harm in that. I just don't want them to later on come back and say, well, you pushed me into this, and we didn't think we had enough time.
And I think to address the part of them understanding that we prefer to move sooner, I think we kind of cleared that when we did because originally we were talking about having it in October, right, and we said we really didn't have enough time. So I think out of that conversation, the conversation today, we can definitely, we need to have those meetings.
Yeah.
And have them fully committed.
Sure.
Yeah.
So is the motion to direct staff to have those meetings and let the stakeholders know that we want to have this in March?
Second, if that's your motion.
Well, wait a minute. In the past, is that a staff-driven process or a?
Well, I think it's certainly appropriate that the staff can try to help convene this discussion and talk to the groups and share the policy discussions and get better, not better, but information sharing about what we're talking about. Ultimately, the staff cannot run or raise money for the campaign.
Right.
I think it is appropriate that we talk to them about what the policy goals are and what are the options.
Okay.
And then what I would suggest is then they have to then respond to the council about their willingness. So we can serve as facilitator and convener, and then at some point there's a handoff.
An educator, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll make the motion that staff be the facilitator and the convener for a March bond.
Second.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm okay with having conversations moving forward. I'm hesitant about a March bond in part because it would be the only thing on the ballot. I'm looking at Councilmember Stevenson's chart here that shows that when we've done an affordable housing bond in the past, it has been tied to another bond to bring everybody out, to bring more folks out to approve an affordable housing bond. We have since passed in 2015 the penny tax for affordable housing. I'm also cautious about moving forward quickly on this, as much of what I'm hearing from both the business and from residential communities are there's a lot we can do as a city around housing affordability to get more housing on the ground before we pass a bond. I'm hearing folks say that they're cautious about raising taxes to pay for affordable housing. And I just don't think we've made the case yet, so
So I think this is about having a conversation.
it is, but
Yes.
with the idea of it being in March, and I think that's what gives me some hesitancy. I'm okay, I will vote for this first step, to have the conversations, but I want to note my hesitancy about a March.
That's fair. And March 3rd is actually Super Tuesday.
It is.
So everyone will be actually voting on Super Tuesday. It may not be other bonds on it, but it will be pulling people out to the polls. So,
Yeah.
so that may be, that was one of the things,
Okay.
because the thing about,
Did we vote?
Yeah.
Okay, no, we had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we move to the report recommendation of the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There's 4 items on the agenda today. The first is an update and revised proposal associated with Wake County room occupancy and prepared food and beverage tax agreement. This is something that we've talked about with you on several occasions. Staff's coming forward to get the presentation ready. I just wanted to make a couple of comments in introduction before we get to the update. First, again, I just wanted to say thank you to the hard work of the staff, both from city and county, for pulling this together, as well as all the various stakeholders in the process. There is always the importance to get it over the finish line, but we've come a long way, and so I just really wanted to say thank you for that. Particularly on the city side to Jim Green and Allison Bradsher. They've worked a lot of hours with their folks as well, and just wanted to say thank you for that. The purpose today is to review where we are in the process, including there was a commissioner meeting yesterday on this topic. We want to update you on that. And there's 2 action items in your agenda, 2 separate items. One is to approve the 21st Amendment in various revisioned forms, which we'll talk about. And the second is a joint feasibility study that's been proposed on a soccer stadium entertainment district. So those are your 2 items in front of you. So what we'll do is we'll go through the update presentation and look for your guidance and feedback about what happens next. So Allison, if you're going to kick us off, thanks.
All right, thank you. So good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and thank you for your time today, and certainly welcome back. Just a level set and a reminder, in 1991, Wake County was authorized to levy a countywide 6% room occupancy tax and a 1% prepared food and beverage tax, with the purposes of supporting a convention center, arena, and other cultural, sports, and art activities here in Wake County. So the agenda for today, we're going to review the interlocal process to date. Jim Green and I will provide updates since we met with you last on July 2nd, and then Jim will wrap up the presentation and review the amended recommendation. So the 20th Amendment called for specific items to be reviewed, and those are listed on the slide and really centered around public engagement, a review of the financial models, funding recommendations and requirements for the PNC and Convention Center, and a capital maintenance plan for the existing assets which support the interlocal revenues. And the due date for this work effort is to conclude no later than January 1st of 2020. So while the previous slide gave us the parameters by which we were working, jointly with the county staff, we developed a process which actually started back in September of 2018. And that has included an RFI process conducted by the county, a presentation of all of the RFI responders to the stakeholders, a total of 6 stakeholder meetings that were held throughout the county during the October 2018 to June 2019 timeframe. And all this information is available on the Wake County website, which is another layer of the transparent process that we've had. So all of that led to a joint city and county manager recommendation, which was presented to you and the Wake County Board in early July. And the recommendations are really just summarized here. It was to continue our previous commitments set forth in the prior interlocal agreements. It was to support the enhancement of the PNC Arena, provide financial capacity in the future to expand the convention center and support the facilities that we have today, including the convention center, the Duke Energy for the Performing Arts, and 3 sports facilities in Cary, which include the baseball, soccer, and tennis complexes. And in addition, funding was allocated for an RFP process to be conducted this fall for an indoor sports complex, which was identified through the Destination Strategic Plan. And a commitment was made to keep the small project funding, which is a process run by the county, and then actually to support a medium project funding source, which will be jointly administered by the city and the county. So that was just a quick update of the process to date and just a high-level summary of what we brought you on July 2nd. Then, as the city manager indicated, that same presentation was presented to the commission on July 8th, and they actually had some feedback, and Jim's going to highlight that in a minute. So some of the updates since then, I'm going to kick it off with a revenue update. So as we move through the process, the actual revenue collected for the year totaled a little over $60 million, and this was against a budgeted number of $57 million. So we wanted to go back in and update the financial models for the actual results. So the amended recommendation uses the same growth rates, which were shown on the chart there at 4% in the short term for occupancy, dropping to 3%, and 5% for prepared food and beverage, dropping to 4% for the out years in the financial model. And so these assumptions are balanced. They're not too aggressive, and they're not too conservative. And the bottom part of that chart there shows that once we overlay those assumptions into the new base year of FY19 actuals, that we did experience an increase in the out years, which actually has allowed for the amended recommendation to come forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to highlight the feedback from the county board and the resulting amended proposal.
Thank you, Allison. Mayor, members of council, good afternoon and welcome back. So July 2nd, your last meeting before your break, Denise Foreman, Assistant County Manager, and I went over a lot of information, in particular discussed the city and county managers' recommendations for this funding. Good conversation with council, a lot of questions. We then went on July 8th and had a similar presentation with the county commission. So on July 8th, we heard feedback from the county commission really focused on 3 areas from the recommendations that we provided. First was to consider additional funding for the PNC Arena. You may remember that the original recommendation included $8 million, leveraging, $8 million a year, leveraging about $115 million in debt for PNC Arena improvements. The second item the commission asked us to evaluate was the medium project funding, to see if there was additional funding available to support those medium-sized projects. If you remember, that would be a competitive process for projects $20 million and up. The recommendations from the original proposal included $42.1 million for this medium-sized project fund, with about $22 million of that coming from the convention center model fund balance. The last area the county commission asked us to look at was consider the broader economic development impact associated with the Downtown South project. You've seen a lot of that in the paper, and so the request was that staff look at that and come back with some thoughts. So the county commission at the time set a follow-up work session on August 12th. And between the time of the regional presentation and the August 12th, city staff worked with county staff and the city and county manager and brought back a revised proposal. This was shared with city council as part of your August 9th manager's update. So the recommendations, revised recommendations included increasing the annual contribution to PNC Arena from $8 million to $9 million, which would leverage about $130 million approximately in debt. That additional revenue came from just what Allison discussed, looking at the actual revenue over the past few months, the full year through June, which afforded us to the ability to increase revenue in the model. The second item, the revised recommendation included increasing the medium projects fund from $42.1 million to $46.6 million, so about a $4.5 million increase. $1 million of that was from the recommendation that included $15 million for property acquisition around the convention center. With some updated information, we were able to reduce that number to $14 million and put the money in the medium projects fund. The remainder of the funds came from the county side of the model by increasing a year in that funding model. The last area was a recommendation to do a joint feasibility study on the soccer stadium / entertainment complex at the downtown South project. Important to note that it is not recommended that this be paid for from the hospitality taxes. This study, we would have to identify other resources to pay for that. But the recommendation is for a joint study between the city and county. How to pay for that, how much, who does what, the percentages, all that is still to be determined. As far as the scope for this study, some of the things that county staff discussed with the county commission included the market demand for this project, the impact on existing facilities from the soccer stadium, the overall economic impact, building programming for the soccer stadium, and the impact on Southeast Raleigh and that important public engagement as part of the process. So with that, at the time of the County Commission work session, the County Commission showed general support for those three revised recommendations, and so that led to city and county staff putting together the agenda that you have in front of you and that the County Commission considered yesterday. There are actually two motions. The first would be to approve the 21st Amendment to the interlocal agreement using the updated information along with any budget amendments, and the second is to authorize the city manager to work with the county manager on this joint feasibility study. So that was Thursday. So let me give you an update and 4 changes that have occurred since. So over the weekend, there was good conversation between the city and county manager and our partners with the Centennial Authority at the arena. The original language in the agreement that you received in your agenda had some specific dates that the Centennial Authority and arena would be required to provide some information on leases and other things that were needed for the tri-party agreement. During the conversation, we realized that date was a little restrictive, and so the information that you have in front of you or on the screen, we're going to hand out in a second, is revised information or revised language in that Section 5, still requiring a 3-party agreement, still requiring the Centennial Authority to bring that funding plan and lease information, but that date has been removed to give them some more flexibility as they negotiate with the hurricanes. So that was the first item. Yesterday in the county manager and assistant manager's presentation to the county commission, the county commission approved the interlocal agreement unanimously, but with 3 changes. First, The county, just like the recommendation you have in front of you, had two motions, one for the interlocal agreement, one for the feasibility study. The county commission decided to combine those two into one motion. The second change was on the feasibility study. There was a good discussion with the county commission about what this study would involve, and there was a amendment to add "and the surrounding properties," not only looking at the Downtown South project, but looking at the impact of this project on the surrounding properties for Downtown South. And then the final change was in Section 14, which included a recommendation for a little over $2 million a year to leverage about $30 million in debt that could go to a public-private partnership for the Convention Center Hotel in downtown. Originally, the recommendation included the city and county manager working together to make that recommendation, but the city council would approve that ultimate recommendation. And the Wake County Board added, and you can see highlighted in red, that the Wake County Board of Commissioners would also have final approval for that funding and agreement. So, as the city manager stated earlier, we're here for discussions, happy to answer any questions you may have, and we'll proceed with whatever action you take. Just to let you know, we did talk when we came July 2nd. Once this is approved, there is a couple items that we need to set up. There was the competitive process for the indoor sports complex and the competitive process for the medium projects fund as well. We would work with the county on that. We have not established those processes, but we will need to do that. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Does anybody have any?
So what would be an estimated cost for a feasibility study?
So we have not finalized the scope. We've heard everything from $50,000 up. Some of the work on this project, I know the developer has already done some economic development studies. They are working with ULI this week on some studies. So the hope is that some of those studies, some of that work the developer has already done can be used for this feasibility study and would allow, one, cost to come down a little bit, and two, to speed this project up a little bit.
So what's the upper end?
Well, really don't have an upper end. So during the discussions, the feasibility study has, there's been scope added, including looking at the surrounding properties. Right. So we don't have a cost estimate at this time on the upper end.
All right.
I think if I could, I think there's been some good discussion about the feasibility study. I think the scope is still kind of getting fleshed out. Right. And so what we would interpret from this action would be to direct the city and the county staff to go and develop a proposal that can iron out some of those details. So again, if the scope and the timing grows, the cost grows. Right. So those two things are interrelated.
So I'd like to make a comment on that. So one of the items we're going to be asked to vote on was the amendment that the county commissioners made. If you can get back to that language where it talks about.
Yes, sir. Actually, that's the old language. The
surrounding
areas.
Properties is not the new language?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I
surrounding
thought,
properties. You just
right
passed
there.
it, yeah.
Yes, that is the new language. And the updated interlocal agreement that we received from the county yesterday afternoon with these changes, the red line version is being passed around now.
Okay.
Okay.
So my comment here is I do appreciate the direction that the county commissioners are taking on this, which is to say, if we're paying for the feasibility study, I don't want the scope of it to be narrowly focused on the developer's vision only. If we're going to get involved in a feasibility study, we should certainly look at their proposal, but we need to compare it against other proposals that we might have. What is our community's vision for the development of this land going forward? Is it sports and entertainment? Is it an innovation district with a sort of a Wake Tech educational hub in there? And so it just makes it very hard to have a conversation about valuing the feasibility study of one project without taking into account other community values that might yield a different and perhaps better outcome. I'm not saying it would be, but we haven't had that conversation. And we're spending money on someone else's idea and not on our own ideas.
Go ahead, I have a
And
question.
so
you
last
done.
little piece, and that is, of course, we've heard county commissioners talk about concerns about gentrification and dislocation down there and environmental degradation down there. And those are all important considerations. I've talked to the applicant about those things, and he said, yes, we're interested in community benefits agreements, but we don't know what that is, and we don't know who the stakeholders would be in that. So both alternative development scenarios and all the community benefits, environmental benefits of this are important elements that I want to be able to consider in weighing the value of their project's feasibility against other community interests that we might have for that area.
So my question is, feasibility study to me means it doesn't just look at this idea, it looks at what's feasible for that particular area holistically.
Great.
So
Good.
that's my understanding.
I just want to make sure that
Well, no,
that's
I don't know.
everybody's
I
agreement.
thought the feasibility study was the feasibility of that project.
So the feasibility study started out looking at specifically the soccer stadium.
Right.
Now has increased to looking at the project and surrounding the project as well. And Mr. Stevenson, some of those ideas that you mentioned there is similar to what the county commission discussed yesterday, looking around, again, seeing what the full impact of this project will be.
So I guess my comment would be, I heard the manager say you're gonna go off with the county staff and talk about doing a little bit more work on scoping. So the question to me is, what are we paying for? And are we gonna narrowly scope it around one person's economic development vision for sports and entertainment? Are we gonna talk about the community's vision for maybe a different land use that we might prefer to have in that area?
Yeah, I like the idea of, saving money if we can use some work that somebody else has already done, but I'm really concerned about, any inherent bias there towards one particular outcome. And so I very much support, broadening that.
So the other thing, and I believe we need to put I don't feel comfortable with an open-ended feasibility study from the city's perspective. I think we need to put a cap on it. I would say for our portion, no more than $200,000, which should be more than enough to cover it from our part of it. But we definitely need to put a max on it.
Well, I think that the county manager and the city manager are going to work together to bring us back language and look into cost before we would, I don't think approving this now is setting the scope, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but.
No, I think that's correct. I would say, and I would certainly not wish to speak for the county manager, I think we would be interested in getting some guidance about what you want us to look at. And so I think, for example, and there's no judgment on this one way or the other, it started as a feasibility study of really just the soccer facility and not the total project, not the economic impacts of the total project. Is certainly very appropriate, perfectly reasonable to take the scope and say, we'd like to look at the totality of the project. Either one are fine. They just have different outcomes. There's different amounts of time, there's different amounts of money. I think one of the stipulations at the county discussion was, and the results by December. I think that's, I'll just simply say, I think if you use the broader scope, I think it's going to take more time. So I don't think the council you don't have to decide that cost and specifics today. It would be helpful to get feedback similar to Mr. Stevenson about what you'd like to see in it. From what is it that the county and the city staff is trying to scope generally? Is it broader or is it narrower? That would help.
Well, I think part of it is I think we have different definitions of what a feasibility study is. My understanding was that it was the proposed project, you know, if we're looking to put tax dollars into it, what's the return on investment? Is that a feasible project? Sounds like Mr. Stevenson is talking about feasibility in the terms of what's feasible to put down there, which is a whole open-ended question, and that's two totally different things.
Yes,
So this language, which the county approved, talks about the feasibility of the proposed soccer and entertainment stadium and the surrounding properties. So what is the feasibility of the soccer and entertainment center and the potential to redevelop? I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by.
Okay, well, what I heard the manager say is it's up to us to set the scope, and he invites information like has been provided at the table. And so now I want to add one other thing. Obviously, this is an opportunity zone. It was designed to help revitalize ailing parts of cities. And so, and there's a huge capital gains tax protection windfall that's going to accrue to somebody. And I think that capital gains windfall accrues to us first. I mean, it's a revitalization for us. It's not a revitalization for a private developer. Sure, we want them to be partners in the deal because we want them to build it. But overall, there's really not much value to me in looking at just the feasibility of one soccer facility. We need to look at what the impact of anything we do here is on the development, the use of the Opportunity Zone funds, and who's going to benefit from those. You know, whether it's going to be equitable and inclusive, or whether it's going to lead to gentrification and dislocation. And you're not going to get that from this feasibility study. You're going to get a very narrowly focused economic response on one project that may or may not be connected to the community's vision for that area.
So Mr. Stevenson, I really appreciate the idea and the vision you have for this area, this part of town. That being said, there has been no development there ever. We have done, in terms of visioning, we have done this Southern Gateway Corridor study and spent quite amount of time looking at what the community wants for that area. The land is privately held. It is not public land. And we have this incredible opportunity before us right now. And I think we owe it to folks to do this language, this joint feasibility study on the proposed soccer and entertainment study and the surrounding properties. I think we are missing out on this specific opportunity if we don't look at it through this lens. This is what's before us. There are no other wonderful visionary projects before us. It is not our land. I think and to your point, like, we need to be at the table. And so I think this helps us get to the table, figure out what's available, and share that we want to be a part of the conversation. We want to make sure that the community is a part of the conversation. And so I'm very much in favor of the language that's here before us today and not broadening it to something that is not, we can't get our hands around it. It won't. I don't see the use in that.
Well,
and also,
just to respond, we can get our hands around it, but only if we put it in the scope to get our hands around it.
It's not public property, it's private property.
Look, we have a responsibility, the citizens of Raleigh, to plan the growth of this city.
And we did the Southern Gateway Corridor project.
And it did not envision a mega sports and entertainment complex down there, okay?
So
it called for moderate mixed-use development, mostly along the Wilmington Street Transit Corridor, and really not so much development along the South Saunders corridor. It was going to be left to be the car-oriented corridor. This is a completely different idea that we're talking about now. We did not talk about opportunity zone development opportunities in that process. I was involved in that process, so I know what's in it.
So as far as opportunity zones, they're for private investment. rather than taxpayers' dollars. That's what it states online. So
But don't ever
that goes
lose
to that point.
Don't ever lose focus that they'll want.
Right, right. I understand. Participation, but the drive is to drive the private development. And it's interesting, you mentioned the fact that this part of Raleigh hasn't seen the growth that other parts, and from what I heard, it was supposed to be low intensity. But I think that's one of the issues we have with the development of Raleigh, because we seem to only put the major developments on certain parts of town. And here's an opportunity that we have in which the community can be a part of now in this conversation. And today, all we're talking about is authorizing our city manager and the county managers to look at what a feasibility study will look like and bring it back to us to vote on.
Okay, well.
Can I ask a question? Do we have to include the feasibility study as part of the interlocal agreement? Could we pass the interlocal agreement without that in there and then have a separate
They're separate. It's two separate
agreement?
motions.
It's separate.
It is
Oh,
two
okay.
separate motions.
Okay, all right.
So I would like to say, Nicole, I totally agree with you, because if we're not careful, we could get really sidetracked here and really get off the target. This is very focused here, and it's a mission, and this is what the objective is of a feasibility study. And so it is privately owned property. If we don't have the buy-in from the property owners, we could do a feasibility study that they wouldn't agree with, and it would go nowhere. We have a great opportunity here, as Mr. Branch said, so I believe we need to stay focused here.
Okay.
Go ahead. You want to ask Mr. Bill?
Okay, I did want to take just a second. I know that Jim had asked if he could just say a couple things. Everybody here has been working really, really hard to try and get this to come together, and Jim really represents the hospitality community in a lot of these discussions, and I said yes, so.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. I appreciate you allowing me the time to make some comment. I will be brief. On behalf of my fellow hoteliers in Wake County, I would like to thank the City Council for your diligent review in the matters of the interlocal tax funding plan. The Wake County Hospitality Alliance for Hotels is in accord with your decisions and support your recommendations. Over the last 2 years, a 10-year destination strategic plan was written by an outside consultant, JLL, and with input from all Wake County and city municipalities and stakeholders. The hotel community supports the recommendations of this strategic tourism plan and for the funding of projects throughout the interlocal tax revenues. These help communities achieve those planned objectives. I would also like to state it is important that a proper vetting process be established for the new medium-sized projects that will be funded. This vetting process will ensure submitted projects are properly approved for funding that meets specific criterion and applied to the best use for future tourism growth by increased overnight stays, which will continue to grow this specific source of tax funding.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Ms. Crowder?
So Mayor, and I'd like to make a motion. I move that we approve the interlocal funding recommendation, required budget amendments, and the revised 21st interlocal government with one language change. The removal of the phrase, "a Wake County Board of Commissioners," obtained within the second sentence in Section 14 in the 21st interlocal agreement related to parking and/or related infrastructure necessary to attract a headquarters hotel.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
With the understanding that the cost of the feasibility study will
No,
be.
I'm not,
brought
we're not
back.
there.
Separate. That's a separate
I beg your
motion.
pardon.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Second, authorize the city manager to work with the county manager on a joint feasibility study to evaluate soccer stadium, entertainment complex, and the surrounding projects at downtown South. That's my motion.
Second.
And I'm going to support that, understanding that the county commissioners may have to give us some more detail about what they intended by including the language around surrounding properties, and there may be an opportunity when the manager goes back, the managers get together and put their heads together on this, that they will at least include the conversation we've had today about the scoping.
Okay.
So,
All in favor?
again, Ruffin, we are interested in knowing what it's going to cost before we commit ourselves. Okay?
Including that. Yes.
I would say, Mr. Thompson, I'm interested as well.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And I do want to take just a second to thank everybody that's here that worked on this. And I do want to take a second to recognize some of our past city councilors. Ann Franklin, I see. Kieran Shanahan. I saw Perry Saffron earlier. Perry was here. And Jessie Talley-Ferris. Jessie still here? There she is. Okay, did I miss anybody? Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, Blue Ridge Board, oh, sorry.
That's right. That's okay. Next item on the manager's report, Blue Ridge Road widening project. Again, this is another one of our transportation projects funded through the 2017 bonds. Purpose today is to give you an update on the design and seek any potential feedback as we move forward. Sylvester Percival with Engineering Services here for the presentation.
Good afternoon. The Blue Ridge Road widening project is approximately 2 miles in length. It extends from Raleigh near Rex Hospital and ends at Crabtree Valley Avenue. That's just south of the Crabtree Valley Mall location. Existing conditions along Blue Ridge is that it is a mainly a two-lane facility, ribbon paved. There are a small section of curb and gutter roadway, as well as sidewalk that exists on the southeast section of the project, but mostly it does not have curb and gutter and sidewalk. Speed limit is 35 miles per hour. It is a very curvy roadway, particularly between Glen Eden and Crabtree Valley Avenue. And so, and that's a result of multiple horizontal curves that exist today. The project's purpose is we're hoping to address traffic capacity along the corridor. Hope to improve the curviness of the road. We're not able to, of course, totally eliminate the very tight horizontal curves that exist today, but we are able to straighten them out some to make them more safe than they are currently. Also proposing bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, as well as a greenway access. There is a greenway that exists along the north section, just not too far from Glenwood Avenue, along the south side of the Crabtree Valley Mall. Also with this project, we're hoping to upgrade some transit stops. For the purpose of this meeting, we kind of have divided the project in two sections. The first section from Raleigh to Glen Eden Drive is what we term as Section 1. We're currently proposing curb and gutter along that section, as well as transit upgrades, lighting, and landscaping. Along this section, the proposed typical section is a two-lane facility with a center turn lane. That is one lane travel in each direction, along with a center turn lane. We're proposing a 10-foot multi-use path on the west side and a 6-foot sidewalk on the east side. I should also note that there's currently exists today between this section extra wide pavement along the east side that existing homeowners or home occupants or property occupants are utilizing for parking. We are proposing to maintain that extra wide lane on the east side through this section. And I'll speak a little bit more about this as we progress with the slides. The second section is from Glen Eden Drive to Crabtree Valley Avenue. Again, we're proposing curb and gutter improvements, transit upgrades, as well as lighting and landscaping. This section, we're proposing a median, so we can consider it a two-lane median divided. but there are certain sections that will have a center turn lane, but mostly we're hoping to make this a two-lane median divided section. There's a 10-foot multi-use path that's proposed along the east side of the roadway and a 6-foot sidewalk on the west side. A couple of the design considerations that we had to take into view when we were looking at this corridor. As you can see in the picture on the right there, existing on-street parking that I just mentioned. This is an existing extra wide pavement area that homeowners are utilizing, and so we are proposing to maintain this wide section so that the parking situation will remain. I have to mention that as a result of this recommendation, we are taking Blue Ridge Road. Blue Ridge Road is a part of a larger street package that we're currently under discussion with NCDOT regarding a road swap. Again, this is just because of what we're proposing. NCDOT did indicate that in order to keep this wide section, we more than likely will have to do a road swap with them in order to maintain this roadway. Other challenges is the Homewood Banks Drive roundabout that we were, I say challenges, but considerations. The Homewood Banks Drive roundabout that is proposed at Homewood Bank Drive. Property impacts, a pedestrian culvert that we're proposing as a part of this project as well. We're maintaining the current at-grade pedestrian crossing, but with this project, we partnered with Parks and Rec's department to propose this pedestrian grade separation crossing. Mark Apartments retaining wall. It's a very high retaining wall, major structure that exists on the west side as you approach the Crabtree Valley Avenue location. It is quite intense, but we were able to maintain the existing infrastructure along that area, sidewalk and curb and gutter, just so as not to impact or further impact that retaining wall. Other considerations is we actually worked with DOT, still are, in relation to the I-440 Ridge Road interchange project. It's still ongoing, and also by the way, this is on the north side of the project, and on the south side is we've been engaged in discussions with Rex Healthcare folks in regards to their proposed street extension project.
Can I ask a question? You said something about an NCDOT road swap. Could you explain a little more about that?
So one of the when we sat down with DOT and asked them to review our proposed improvements, obviously we noted that currently the property owners are utilizing the section there for parking, and one of the immediate response we got back was, well, in order to maintain that, if the city wants to do that, we'll have to maintain the roadway. And so we engaged in discussions with city staff and found out that, yes, this is one such road that we can make a bundle with the remaining roads that are packaged together for the road swap with NCDOT.
So currently it's a state road?
Yes, it is, yes.
So currently with it being a state road, we would have to take another city road and swap the two in order to keep things balanced. Is that really what is
that's
the conversation?
Yes.
Theory.
In theory?
In theory, yes.
Okay.
Good answer. Thank you. Just to highlight a couple of the design features, this is a look of the rendering of the pedestrian culvert that I mentioned in the previous slide. You notice that on the right you see the pedestrian culvert, and on the left is the new culvert that we're proposing as a result of this project. Also, not shown here is the roundabout that is being proposed at Homewood Banks Drive as well. Currently, that intersection of Homewood Banks Drive and Blue Ridge Road is unsignalized. We're proposing as a means of better control to place a roundabout at that intersection. So far, we've held, in terms of public engagement, one preliminary design public meeting that was held in July of 2018. We've had discussions with BPAC, made presentations with BPAC, got their feedback, and were able to incorporate changes that they recommended. We've had a couple community meetings in the spring of 2019, and lastly, most lately, we've had the 65%, which is our advanced design public meeting in May of 2019, which brings us to today's presentation, noted here as summer of 2019. Immediately following this presentation, we're hoping to be able to begin right-of-way discussions with property owners. And in summer of 2020, we're hoping to complete those right-of-way acquisitions. In summer of 2020 is when we hope to advertise the project, to begin construction by fall of 2020, and complete the construction 2 years from that date, which is fall of 2022. The project cost at this point for a right-of-way utility relocation and construction is $12 million. Funding for this project was received via the 2013 transportation bond, but based on existing current design, we anticipate a funding gap. As a part of the FY21 CIP process, options for additional funding sources will be evaluated. Questions?
What's the size of the funding gap? Do you?
Well, the most of the funding that we've received has been associated with design mainly, and so right now we have an existing budget of available budget of 1.09, I believe, million, and so but keeping into consideration that most of the funding that we've received was mainly for design, and so we're hoping with the upcoming FY21 budget preps, we're able to identify those additional funds.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, the next item is Pool Road widening project. Again, same scenario, bringing forward a road project from your previous transportation bonds, and staff is here from Engineering Services to present. So Mark Young with Engineering Services will make the presentation, see if you have any feedback or questions.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm presenting for the Pool Road Improvement Project. The project extends approximately 1.6 miles. It goes from the intersection of Pool Road with Maybrook Drive and Hickory Hollow Lane, and will extend to the east all the way to the Neuse River Trail. It also extends a slight distance down Barwell Road as well. The existing conditions, and if all this kind of sounds familiar to the previous presentation, it is mainly a two-lane roadway with shoulders on either side. There is some curb and gutter along sections of the roadway. Also some sidewalks. The major difference here, though, is that the speed limit on this particular road is 45 miles per hour. The purpose of the project, again, kind of mirroring the previous project, is to improve traffic capacity. We also want to improve safety, obviously. That's an important factor. Bicycle connectivity and pedestrian connectivity are also goals of this particular project. We will also be adding transit stops, and of course, by extending the project to the Neuse River Trail, we are going to be accomplishing park access as well. Consequently, then, the proposed design, we will have a 12-foot multi-use or multi-purpose path on the north side and an 8-foot sidewalk on the south side. We will utilize 11-foot travel lanes and a 13.5-foot grass median. This grass median is sized in order to accommodate left turn lanes at locations along the 1.6-mile stretch.
Certainly, there are certain design considerations that have to be taken into account. One of the more important ones is, of course, utility coordination. We also have to redesign the Barwell Road intersection with the improvements to Pool Road. And there are certainly impacts with adjacent properties that have to be taken into account. Some of the design elements that we have in this particular project, we will have 3 dry detention basins. One of those is located on the City of Raleigh Park property. Another one is near the Barwell Road intersection. And then there's one about midway through the project, located south and west of Jeffrey Street. The traffic signals at the 2 endpoints, Maybrook and Barwell, will get upgrades as a consequence of this project. We are looking at installing a hawk signal about midway through the project if it meets warrants. So that would help with the pedestrian movements. Of course, landscape materials, we're looking at low maintenance, native and natural. We want them to be highly visible, but not impair adequate sight distance for vehicle movements. And of course, we want them to avoid utilities. The preliminary design public meeting was held back in September of 2018. That was a 25% plan meeting. We went to BPAC in September of 2018. They gave us some very valuable feedback and recommendations. And actually, the design was changed as a result of that meeting. The original design had bike lanes in the roadway, but with the speed being 45 miles per hour, we thought it was prudent to move those out of the roadway. So consequently, we placed the multi-use path on the north side and then a sidewalk on the south side. We've gone twice to the Southeast CAC and presented to them in January of 2019 and May of 2019. Just prior to this presentation today, we did do a public meeting, an advanced design 65% public meeting in June to the public. This brings us to today's presentation. Hopefully following this, we will begin right-of-way and easement acquisitions. Hopefully with that completing in summer of 2020. Shortly after that, we'd like to go to bid for the project and begin construction then in fall of 2020 with the completion occurring in the summer of 2022. The total project cost is estimated right now at $11.2 million. As with the previous project, the original funding was from the 2013 transportation bond. Based on the current design, we are anticipating a funding gap. So as part of the fiscal year 21 CIP process, we will look at options for additional funding for this project.
I believe this project was included in the last transportation bond as well, so there should be some funding set aside there.
Okay.
Because it's this street, Rock Quarry Road and Barwell. I know this well because it's my district.
You've been asking for this as long as you've been
Yeah,
on
I've been
council.
asking for this, and it's in my district, so I know there's funding in the last transportation bond, the most recent transportation bond for this project. And definitely, I just want to say thank you. I know the residents there are ready for construction.